Are you having problems with filling hand-drawn vector shapes in OpenToonz? Well, why not use the built-in geometric shapes and manipulate those? Then your fill will work every time. And that's what we'll be looking at today. Hello ladies and gents, and welcome to a look at editing vector lines and shapes so that you can guarantee a filled shape. I like using vectors as it allows more flexibility when setting up your animations. You can draw a character or object and resize and move them much more easily than a raster one. But drawing using the pen tool, even when the shape is completely enclosed, doesn't always guarantee that the fill works. And even when it does, the fill can disappear for no reason, which can be very annoying and just unproductive. Today I'll show the difference in fill between a hand-drawn shape and an edited geometric shape. And you can jump straight to that part by clicking the timestamp in the description below. But first I'd like to briefly run through how you can edit a basic shape on a vector level. Working with fills on the Toonz raster level works consistently, so you might prefer to use that level type. But if working in vectors makes sense to you, so you can manipulate the shapes or to use auto in-betweening, then you'll need to understand how to edit a shape. And you can edit the control points for any line or shape on the vector level, but I'll demo using a rectangle here. So first choose the geometric tool from the left hand side, then choose the shape that you want from the drop down here, I'll leave it at rectangle, and then set the auto group option. This means that the rectangle will be on its own level in this drawing, so filling will fill the whole rectangle whether it overlaps another or not. I'll put together another tutorial sometime looking at these hidden drawing levels and explain it more then, but for now ticking that box really helps. Then decide if you want autofill. Ticking this box just means that the rectangle will be filled in automatically with the same colour as the outside line. Then choose snap if you want to snap this rectangle to another object on this drawing. So that's the only settings we need, so let's just draw a rectangle on here. There we go. So if you click the control point editor from the left hand side there and select on the rectangle, you'll see the rectangle is made up of 4 control points, one at each corner. And you can click and drag on any of these 4 points to reposition them. And you can add more control points by holding the control key, and you'll notice the cursor gets a plus sign next to it, and just click anywhere on any of the lines and you add new points. And you can drag these round in the same way as the original 4 corners. And you can click and drag on a line to add a curve. And note this adds a drag handle on each corner point, and then you can drag on the line again to adjust the curve, or you can move the drag handles to adjust it from one side or from the other. Now each control point can have 2 drag handles, and only one's being shown at the minute because there's only one curve on these top 2 items. To add a curve on the line below, you can just simply drag that line to turn it into a curve, and you'll notice a second drag handle appears on the top point and a single drag handle on the bottom. Or you can right click on one of the control points and choose set non-linear control point, and then a second drag handle appears, and you can just create a curve by moving that drag handle. You'll notice here the difference is there's a curve at the top point and the line moves directly in a straight line from this second point, whereas on the right hand side where I dragged the line out, it adds a control point at the top and bottom points because of the curve coming from both sides. So if I just reset this rectangle back to its original state by pressing Ctrl Z to undo. So if I hold Control and add a point in the middle, and then again if you right click on the point and choose set non-linear control point, 2 drag handles appear. Now if I click and drag either one of those, you'll notice they're connected in a straight line. And if you want them to move independently, just hold the Alt key and you'll see the cursor changes to this angle shape, and then when you click and drag one of the handles, you only move that one handle and not the other one. So now these handles are both independent, so you can move either without pressing the Alt key. And if you want to reconnect them together again, just press the Alt key and then click one of the handles, and you'll notice they spring back to join together. And now they're connected together, whether you hold Alt or not, until again you press Alt, and that toggles back to moving independently. So I'll just undo that again. So the final thing to show is that you can move more than one point at a time. So if I just add a few more points to this rectangle, and with the control point showing, I can now click and drag to highlight more than one of the points, and then you can drag just those points you've selected. So again, you've got to select the shape to see all of the points, then click and drag over the points that you want to move. So we'll use all of these techniques shortly as we manipulate a rectangle shape into a more complex one. So that'll be holding the control key and adding more points, moving the points to where they need to be, adding curves onto lines and adjusting them using the drag handles. So that's how you can edit the points. Let's see it in action and the difference it makes to a fill. So in the past when I've animated, I've often sketched out the keyframes on a raster layer first and then drew over them neat on a vector layer. And you can see this in the tutorial in the card above. So to show the difference between a shape drawn using the brush tool and one originally created as a simple rectangle then manipulated, I decided to use a hand. And I'm not great at drawing hands, so I've imported this photo that we'll trace over, imagining that this is the sketch. So the first drawing we'll do is just to use the brush tool and to draw around the hand. You can try and draw your lines joined together, but they still sit as separate lines, so that if you select one part of the line and expect to move them all, you won't. Plus filling can be quite sporadic as to whether it works, but I'll draw this first hand this way and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so that's number one finished. I'll just move it over here. And you'll notice as I select parts of the line, you'll see exactly which lines I drew. And if you use the control point editor tool, you can see exactly where the drawing points are on each of the lines. Okay, so that's number one. So by just drawing lines, you can see in places like here between the two fingers and here at the top of the thumb, but you've still got the issue that this is just a collection of separate lines, so the fill tool doesn't always work, that we'll see later. So the most flexible way to draw lines with the brush tool is to actually leave a small gap between each line that you draw. Then afterwards you can use the tape tool to join them together as a single seamless line. And this helps with editing the shape later and with the fill. So now I've got the rough lines, I just select the tape tool over here. I make sure the type is set to normal and not rectangular. The mode is endpoint to endpoint, which is one end of the line to the other, not to the middle of a line. And ensure that join vectors is ticked. But then simply draw from the end of one line to the next. You see the green circles highlighting where it's going to join. And now if you select any part of the hand, it'll show as a single enclosed line. And if we look at the control point editor and select on the line, you see it's one continuous enclosed line. So I'll just drag this over to the side again. So although the line shown for number 2 is one continuous line, for OpenToonz it doesn't quite count it as an enclosed shape. So the best way to have an enclosed shape that's been recommended to me and I found works the best, and is very unnatural, is to start with a simple shape like a rectangle, and then use the control point edit tools that we've just looked at to manipulate the shape to fit your design. So if we just quickly drop a rectangle onto here, and again we're set to rectangle and we're set to auto group. So you can see me using the control key to add points, dragging the line and drag handles to add and adjust the curves, and using the Alt key to move the drag handles independently. Now you probably take a little bit more time to adjust your shape than I did, but it's just a proof of concept. Okay, so that's the third hand finished. Okay, so there's the 3 hands. Drawing number 1 was just drawing with the brush tool, manually trying to connect the lines as I drew them. Drawing number 2 I drew with the brush tool, leaving small gaps and then using the tape tool to connect them to create a single line. And drawing number 3 was a rectangle that I just manipulated with the control point editor to fit the shape of the hand. So let's see how fill works with all of these. So the first thing we'll have to do is to add a new colour. So we'll do that by pressing this button here. And we'll adjust the colour just to be an orange type colour. Choose the fill tool. The fill type is normal, meaning you just click on the screen to do the fill. The mode type is areas, meaning the colour just fills the area and doesn't affect the line. And the minimum gap is on 2. So let's try and fill the 3 hands. So firstly number 1, if I click in there, that doesn't fill as I'd expect. Number 2 does, and number 3 does. So the problem with filling number 1 is OpenToonz believes there's a gap somewhere in that line. Even though you can see clearly there isn't, you have to increase the maximum gap size. So if you increase it up to say 5 or 6, it'll then fill. And once it's filled, when you reduce the gap size of the fill tool, the fill will often disappear. Like that. And increasing it again doesn't bring it back, it doesn't recognise it's still been filled, so you have to refill it. And I found when using just lines like I have for hand number 1, that if you've drawn and coloured in an animation, then saved it and reopened it the next day, some of the fills have disappeared and you have to go back and refill them again, and again, and again. Which is why for a while I moved on to the style of hand number 2. And on this occasion, filling it worked. However, this doesn't always work and I don't know why. But using the tape tool with the join vectors option ticked increases the chances, so might be worth using sometimes. But filling in the third hand that started as a rectangle has always worked for me, every time. You don't need to increase the gap size because OpenToonz realises that it's a fully enclosed shape. And using this technique also helps when editing the control points as there's fewer of them, as you can see here compared to number 2. And it also helps when using the auto in-betweener, but that's a chat for another day. So go ahead, why not try manipulating the built-in shapes to put your vector animations together. As unnatural as it seems at first, it's not much slower and has many benefits. So if you like this video, please like and share to help the channel, and comment below if you have any questions or requests for other tutorials. And if you're new to the channel, I'd love to have you subscribe to be reminded of future tutorials and animations. And I'll be back next Friday with another video, and that's a guarantee.